My name is Margaret. I'm 65 years old, and today I did something that shocked even myself. I looked straight into my only son's eyes, smiled calmly, and handed him a white envelope. He thought it was money. He always thinks everything is about money. His lips curled into that arrogant smirk he wears whenever he believes he has outsmarted me. But when he opened it, the paper inside made his hands freeze. His eyes widened. He read the words twice, then three times, before finally choking out, "What is this?" "An eviction notice," I replied sweetly, tilting my head like I was explaining something simple to a child. He stammered, "Eviction? From my own apartment?" "Oh, darling," I said, my smile never fading. "It isn't your apartment anymore." "Surprise. I just bought the whole building. You have 24 hours to pack." The silence that followed was thick, the kind that makes your heartbeat sound like a drum. He dropped the paper, his face pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. That was the moment my revenge became real. But before you think I'm just some cold, heartless old woman, let me take you back. Let me tell you how we got here, because this story isn't just about revenge. It's about betrayal, heartbreak, and the strength that comes when kindness is taken for granted one too many times. It all began with a jewelry box. I grew up believing in the value of family. My mother, God rest her soul, told me when I was little, "Maggie, family is both your greatest blessing and your greatest test." I didn't understand it then. I do now. For years, I built a quiet life filled with love. My late husband, George, was the love of my life. He was gentle, kind, and the sort of man who opened doors for strangers and never left the house without kissing me goodbye. When he passed away, a part of me went with him. But what he left behind, memories, lessons, and a son, was supposed to be my comfort. My son, Daniel, was all I had left. He was 38, tall like his father, but with sharper edges in his character. Where George was patient, Daniel was quick-tempered. Where George was generous, Daniel had a hunger that never seemed to be satisfied. Still, he was my boy and I loved him fiercely. Among the treasures George and I built together was an antique jewelry collection. It wasn't just shiny trinkets. Every piece told a story. The sapphire necklace George gave me on our 25th anniversary, the emerald ring that belonged to my grandmother, the pearl earrings I wore on our wedding day. Those jewels weren't just worth money. They were the history of my family, tiny fragments of love and legacy kept safe in a polished wooden box. I thought Daniel understood that. I thought he valued it. But one afternoon, while I was out visiting a neighbor, he stole it. Every last piece. He sold the collection behind my back, all for his gambling addiction. I discovered the betrayal on a Sunday morning when I opened the box to wear a necklace to church. Empty, completely bare. My hand shook as I lifted it, my knees went weak, and I had to sit down before I fainted. At first, I thought maybe I'd misplaced them, but deep inside, I knew. A mother always knows. When I confronted him, he didn't even look sorry. He stood in my kitchen, arms folded, eyes avoiding mine. "It's just jewelry, Mom. You weren't using it. I needed the money. Just jewelry." Those words sliced through me like a knife. "Daniel," I whispered, "those pieces belong to your grandmother. To me. They were supposed to go to your children one day." He shrugged. "Better the money goes to something useful." I wanted to scream, to shake him, to demand how gambling debts were more useful than family heirlooms. But the words caught in my throat. The son I raised, the boy I held, the child I protected, was standing in front of me with no remorse in his eyes. That night, I cried until my pillow was soaked. The man who once hugged me with sticky little hands after spilling juice on the floor was gone. In his place stood a selfish stranger who saw me as a bank account and nothing more. But grief has a way of hardening into something else. Slowly, through the ache, a seed of resolve began to grow. I decided that if Daniel only understood money, then money would be the tool I'd use to teach him the lesson of his life. The first step was pretending. Oh, that was the hardest part. Pretending to forgive. Pretending to accept his weak apology that came only after I refused to pay his bills. Pretending to smile when he dropped by, all fake charm and manipulative sweetness, trying to butter me up for the next loan. Inside, though, I was planning. I began selling some of the land George and I had bought years ago. Quietly, carefully, piece by piece. George always said real estate was power, and I realize now just how right he was. Every signature, every deal, every dollar that flowed into my account was fuel for the plan forming in my mind. Meanwhile, Daniel kept digging his own grave. I watched him gamble, lose, beg, borrow, and repeat the cycle. I helped here and there, small things, groceries, advice, a hot meal. But money? No, not anymore. Mom, he said one evening, barging into my house without knocking, I need $5,000. Just a loan. I'll pay you back next week. I raised my eyebrow. Like you paid back the last one? He scowled. You don't get it. This is my big chance. I'm on a hot streak. I held up my hand. Daniel, enough. You've taken enough. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I sat there in the silence that followed, my heart heavy, but my resolve stronger than ever. Because while he was busy chasing illusions, I was preparing reality. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Daniel lived in a decent apartment building downtown. It wasn't luxurious, but it was in a prime location, and the owner had been hinting at wanting to sell. When the papers crossed my desk, my heart nearly leapt out of my chest. This was it, the perfect chance. I signed the deal with a steady hand, though inside I was trembling. Not from fear, but from anticipation. The keys jingled in my palm like a bell tolling justice. It was time. Which brings us back to today, to the moment when my son stared at the eviction notice in disbelief. His lips quivered, his face pale, his arrogance crumbling. You can't do this, he whispered. Oh, I can, I said softly. And I am. The air hung heavy between us, thick with all the words left unsaid, all the love turned sour, all the lessons he never learned. What he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly imagine, was that this was only the beginning. Because when a mother's love is betrayed, the world shifts. And I was just getting started. That night, as he left my house with the eviction notice crumpled in his fist, a storm brewed inside me. I wasn't sure if it was guilt, sadness, or triumph. Maybe all three. But one thing I knew for certain, this story was far from over. Because Daniel wasn't going to leave quietly. And neither was I. The next day, I woke up to find my car windshield smashed. The sound of broken glass still rang in my ears as I stood in the driveway, staring at my shattered windshield. Tiny pieces of glass glittered under the early morning sun, like diamonds scattered across the hood. But these weren't jewels. They were the sharp remains of anger, bitterness, and spite. I didn't need to guess who had done it. Mothers know. Daniel. He had stormed out the night before, his pride wounded, his temper burning hotter than ever. And now, here was his answer to the eviction notice. For a moment, I just stood there, my heart pounding in my chest. A part of me wanted to collapse, to cry at the sight of yet another piece of my life destroyed by the son I raised. But another part of me, the part that had been growing stronger since the day he sold my jewelry, remained calm. I walked back into the house, picked up the phone, and dialed. Police department, a voice answered. Yes, I said, my voice steady. I'd like to report vandalism. The officers arrived within the hour. They were polite, professional, though one of them gave me a pitying look that made my stomach twist. Do you have anyone in mind who might have done this? He asked, his notepad ready. I hesitated. The word son almost slipped out, but I swallowed it. Reporting Daniel felt like pressing a dagger into my own chest. Still, I couldn't keep protecting him forever. My son, I whispered finally. Daniel, we had a disagreement last night. The officer nodded, jotting it down. We'll look into it. Do you want to press charges? I shook my head. Not yet. I wasn't ready for that line to be crossed. Deep inside, despite the betrayal, despite the theft, despite everything, he was still my boy. But as they drove away, the reality weighed heavy. Daniel had drawn first blood in this battle. And battles always escalate. That afternoon, I tried to distract myself. I baked a pie, the way I always do when my hands need something to keep them busy. Apple cinnamon, George's favorite. The smell filled the house, warm and sweet, wrapping me in memories of better days. I carried a slice to the porch and sat down with my neighbor, Mrs. Carter, a kind widow who often checked in on me. "You look tired, Margaret," she said gently, taking a bite. "Is everything all right?" I forced a smile. "Just family troubles." She nodded knowingly. "Family will break your heart faster than strangers ever could." Her words sank deep into me. I thought about Daniel as a boy, how he used to run through this very yard with scraped knees and a grin too wide for his face. I thought about the nights I stayed up late sewing costumes for his school plays, the mornings I packed his lunch, the times I wiped his tears when kids were mean. Where had that boy gone? Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them away. Crying wouldn't change anything. And besides, there was still pie to finish, stories to tell, and a war to fight. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. Daniel didn't call, didn't visit, didn't show up at my door with excuses or fake charm. For a moment, I almost fooled myself into thinking he was reflecting, maybe even feeling guilty. But deep down, I knew better. Daniel never sat in silence unless he was planning something. And I was right. 3 nights later, just as I was getting ready for bed, the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something in my gut told me to answer. "Hello." The voice on the other end was sharp, impatient. "Is this Margaret Walker?" "Yes, who's calling?" "This is First State Bank. We're calling about your son, Daniel Walker. He listed you as a reference." My stomach dropped. "What about him?" "He applied for a loan this week," the man said. "When we reviewed his file, we noticed he mentioned you as a guarantor. We just wanted to confirm your willingness to co-sign." My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles ached. "Excuse me." "Yes, ma'am. He listed you. Would you like to confirm or—" "I will not be signing anything," I interrupted, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Understood," the man replied quickly. "Thank you for clarifying. We'll mark it accordingly." When I hung up, my body trembled with rage. Not only had Daniel vandalized my car, but now he was dragging my name into his financial mess. That was the moment something inside me shifted. The mother in me, the one who had defended him, covered for him, softened the blows of his mistakes, finally stood aside. The woman in me, the wife who had lost her husband, the daughter who had protected her mother's legacy, the fighter who had watched her treasures stolen, took over. Daniel wanted war. Fine. I would give him war. The very next morning, I called my lawyer, Mr. Hayes. He was an old friend of George's, and one of the few people I trusted completely. "Margaret," he said warmly when he picked up, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" "I need your help," I replied firmly. "It's about Daniel." There was a pause. "What's he done this time?" So I told him everything. The jewelry, the gambling, the windshield, the fake guarantor's signature, the eviction notice. Every betrayal laid bare like wounds on the table. By the time I finished, my voice was shaking. "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, Hayes, but I can't let him keep destroying me. Or himself." There was silence on the other end, then a sigh. "Margaret, I've known you for years. You've given that boy more chances than most mothers ever would. If he won't change, then it's time to protect yourself. I'll draft the necessary papers. But you must be ready. This won't be pretty." "I'm ready," I said, though the ache in my chest told me otherwise. The days that followed were filled with paperwork, signatures, meetings. Each document I signed felt like a nail in the coffin of the boy I once knew. But every step also gave me strength. For once, I was no longer reacting to Daniel's chaos. I was controlling it. I started small. I froze the joint account he had once begged me to open for emergencies. I changed the locks on my house. I alerted local pawn shops about the stolen jewelry, in case any pieces resurfaced. Piece by piece, I began to reclaim my life. But with every action, I knew Daniel would retaliate. And he did. It happened on a Friday evening. I had just finished dinner and was cleaning the dishes when a knock thundered against my door. It wasn't polite. It was urgent, aggressive. I dried my hands and opened it. Daniel stood there. His hair was messy, his eyes bloodshot, his face twisted with fury. He reeked of alcohol and desperation. "You think you can ruin me?" he spat, shoving the eviction notice into my chest. "You think you can just kick me out like trash?" I steadied my voice. Daniel, you need help. Gambling, drinking, stealing, it's destroying you. I don't need help, he roared, his face inches from mine. I need money, and if you don't give it to me, you'll regret it. For a moment, fear flickered in my heart. But then, like a flame catching dry wood, my resolve roared back to life. No, Daniel, I said quietly but firmly. You're the one who will regret it. His eyes darkened, his jaw tightened, and in that split second, I knew this was no longer a battle of words. This was war, because the next thing he did was raise his fist. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if my son was about to hit me. Daniel's shadow loomed over me, his fist trembling in the air. For a moment, the world froze. My heart thudded, so hard I could hear it in my ears. The boy I once rocked to sleep, the boy I once bandaged after scraped knees, was standing in front of me now as a man with rage so thick in his eyes, I didn't recognize him. Daniel, I whispered, my voice breaking. His arm twitched, but he didn't bring it down. Instead, his chest rose and fell in quick, angry breaths, his body quaking as though even he wasn't sure what he might do next. For a second, I thought maybe love, just the faintest echo of it, was still holding him back. Then he stepped forward, pressing me back against the doorframe. His words spilled out like venom. You've always tried to control me. Treat me like a kid. But I'm done letting you ruin my life. If you don't give me what I need, I swear. Daniel, I snapped, louder than I intended. My voice startled him, and he blinked, the fist lowering slightly. I straightened my spine and glared right into his eyes. If you ever raise your hand at me again, you'll regret it. Do you hear me? I am not your enemy, but I will not be your victim. The air between us crackled with tension. His lips curled, but his fist slowly unclenched. He muttered something under his breath, turned on his heel, and stormed off into the night, slamming the door so hard it rattled the frame. When he was gone, my legs gave out. I sank onto the floor, my body trembling, my chest tight with a mix of grief and rage. My own son, my own blood, inches away from striking me. The tears came hard and fast, soaking the collar of my blouse. I didn't know if I was crying for him, for me, or for the family we used to be. Maybe all of it. But as I sat there on the hardwood floor, one thought rose through the sorrow like a blade through the dark. Enough. If Daniel was willing to go this far, then I had to go further. The next morning, I met with Mr. Hayes again. His office smelled of leather and old books, a place where truth and law weighed heavier than lies. He took one look at my swollen eyes and clenched jaw and leaned forward. What happened? He asked. He nearly hit me, I said flatly. My own son. Hayes's expression hardened. Margaret, I'm sorry. But if that's where he's going, then we can't afford to wait. You need protection, legal and personal. I don't want to press charges, I said quickly. Not yet. But I want everything else. Restraining orders. Locks. Whatever it takes. He nodded. Then that's what we'll do. We spent the rest of the morning buried in paperwork. I signed documents that felt like shackles around my heart, but shields for my safety. Hayes filed for a protective order, prepared eviction follow-ups, and tightened every legal knot that could keep Daniel from dragging me down with him. When I left his office, I felt both lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter, because I was finally standing up for myself. Heavier, because every step away from Daniel felt like tearing another thread in the fabric of family. For the next week, I tried to live quietly. I took walks in the park, visited Mrs. Carter for tea, even attended Sunday church service where the pastor preached about forgiveness. His words stung like salt in a wound. Forgiveness, such a beautiful word, yet so hard to hold when betrayal cuts so deep. I thought about Daniel as the pastor spoke, about whether I could ever truly forgive him for stealing from me, lying to me, threatening me. But forgiveness, I realized, didn't mean letting him back into my life to destroy me again. Forgiveness was about me, not him. About freeing myself from the chains of anger while still protecting my heart. Still, no matter how much I tried to focus on peace, there was always a shadow at the edge of my thoughts. Daniel. I hadn't heard from him since that night at my door. And silence, when it came from him, was never safe. The quiet broke on a Thursday afternoon. I was in the kitchen making soup when the doorbell rang. My chest tightened, but when I opened the door, it wasn't Daniel. It was a woman. Young, maybe in her late 20s, her hair pulled back, her eyes swollen from crying. She held a toddler on her hip, a little boy with curls and wide, innocent eyes. "Mrs. Walker?" she asked softly. "Yes," I said cautiously. I'm Emily," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I'm Daniel's ex-girlfriend." The words hit me like a gust of cold wind. I stepped aside slowly. "Come in." Emily sat at my kitchen table, her son balanced on her lap, while I poured tea and waited. She looked exhausted, like someone carrying the weight of too many battles. "I didn't know who else to come to," she admitted, brushing tears from her cheeks. "Daniel, he hasn't paid child support in months. He promised he would, but instead he keeps gambling. He owes people money, dangerous people. They've been knocking on my door, Margaret. I'm scared." Her words stabbed into me. Child support. A grandson. My breath caught in my throat as I looked at the little boy reaching for the cookie jar on the counter. "My grandson. What's his name?" I whispered. "Ethan," she said, smiling faintly through her tears. "He's 3. I reached over and gently touched his tiny hand. His skin was soft, his eyes curious, and in that moment, something in me cracked open. For so long I had been drowning in grief and anger over Daniel. But here was Ethan, innocent, pure, untouched by his father's mistakes. I felt love rush through me like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "Emily," I said softly, "you and Ethan will always have a place here. I don't know what Daniel will do next, but I won't let him hurt you. Or this child." Her shoulders shook as she broke into sobs, whispering thank you over and over. For the first time in months, I felt purpose again. Protecting Ethan meant protecting the future. And if Daniel wanted war, then I would fight it not just for myself, but for this boy who deserved better than the chaos his father left behind. The following days brought moments of peace. I took Ethan to the park, watched him chase butterflies, and listened to his giggles echo across the grass. Emily found comfort in talking to me, sharing stories of her struggles with Daniel, how he had charmed her, used her, and abandoned her when responsibility came knocking. I hated hearing it, but it also gave me clarity. Daniel wasn't just hurting me. He was leaving scars on everyone who dared to love him. One evening, after I tucked Ethan into bed on the guest room cot, I sat alone in the living room and whispered to George's photograph on the mantel. "Our boy's gone, George. But look, our grandson is here. Maybe we can still make something good out of all this pain." But peace never lasts long when shadows lurk. On the 7th night after Emily arrived, I woke to the sound of pounding on the front door. My heart leapt into my throat. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the bed and crept down the hallway. The pounding grew louder, more furious, and then a voice I knew all too well roared through the door. "Mom, open this damn door. I know she's in there. You can't hide her from me." Emily's door creaked open behind me, her terrified eyes meeting mine. Ethan whimpered in her arms. I pressed a finger to my lips, signaling her to stay quiet. Then I turned back to the door, my pulse racing, my grip tightening on the bat. Because Daniel wasn't alone. I heard other voices outside. Male voices. Rough, mocking, dangerous. And one of them shouted, "Open up, lady. Daniel owes us money, and if he won't pay, maybe you will." The pounding on the door rattled the hinges, each slam like thunder against my chest. I clutched the baseball bat tighter, my knuckles white, sweat slicking my palms. Daniel's voice boomed again, rough and wild. "Mom, don't make me break this door down." Behind me, Emily's soft sobs broke the silence of the hallway. She clutched Ethan close, rocking him as he whimpered against her shoulder. The boy's tiny fist tangled in her hair, his eyes wide with fear. And then the other voices came again, gruff, mocking. "Come on, lady," one of them growled. "Your boy owes us, and debt's gotta be paid. We can wait all night if we have to." Every muscle in my body trembled, but I refused to show fear. I had survived widowhood, betrayal, the theft of my family's legacy. I would survive this, too. I took a deep breath and called through the door. "Daniel, you and your friends need to leave. Right now." or I'm calling the police." A burst of ugly laughter erupted outside. "She's bluffing," one of the men jeered. Daniel's voice cut through them, sharp and desperate. "Mom, just open the door. They won't hurt you. I just need a little money. Please." The nerve of him, pleading while dragging danger to my doorstep. My voice shook, but I forced strength into every word. "No, Daniel. Not this time. You made your bed. You can lie in it." That must have hit him hard, because for a moment there was silence. Then came the sound of boots scuffling, fists slamming harder into the wood. Emily gasped. "Margaret, they're going to break in." I turned to her, my mind racing. "Take Ethan. Go into the back room. Lock the door and don't open it for anyone but me. Do you understand?" Her tearful eyes widened. "What about you?" "I'll handle this." She hesitated, then nodded and disappeared down the hall, clutching Ethan tightly. I stood there in the dim glow of the porch light filtering through the window, the bat steady in my grip. My heart pounded so loud I thought they'd hear it. The pounding on the door grew harder, the wood groaning under the strain. And then, with one final crash, the lock gave way. The door flew open, slamming against the wall. Daniel stumbled in first, his eyes bloodshot, his face sweaty and frantic. Behind him came two men I didn't recognize, big, burly, with tattoos crawling up their necks and menace dripping from their smirks. "Well, well," one of them sneered, glancing around my living room. "Nice place you got here. Shame if anything happened to it." Daniel lifted his hands, his voice shaking. Just give me the money, Mom. Please. Then they'll leave." I raised the bat, my arm steady now, no longer trembling. "You sold my jewelry. You smashed my car. You nearly raised your hand against me. And now you bring this filth into my home." Daniel's face twisted with shame and fury. "I didn't have a choice." "You always have a choice," I snapped. The taller of the two men stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. "All right, Grandma. Enough chit-chat. Your son owes us 15 grand. Either you pay, or we take it another way." I swallowed hard, forcing myself to hold his gaze. "You won't get a dime from me. Not a single cent." The room went silent for a beat. Then the man chuckled darkly. "Wrong answer." He took another step forward. I tightened my grip on the bat, ready to swing with every ounce of strength left in my bones. And then, before I could move, red and blue lights flashed through the window. Sirens wailed. The men froze, curses spilling from their lips. Daniel's head whipped toward the window, panic etched across his face. "Cops!" the shorter one hissed. They bolted, shoving past Daniel, leaping off the porch and into the night. Tires screeched as a car peeled away down the street. Daniel stood frozen, caught between me and the flashing lights outside. And then the door burst open again, this time with uniformed officers, guns drawn, shouting commands. Hands where we can see them. Daniel dropped to his knees, his hands trembling in the air. I lowered the bat slowly, my heart still racing. Relief washed over me like cool water, but it was tainted by the sight of my son kneeling in my living room, looking smaller and more broken than I had ever seen him. The officers cuffed Daniel, reading him his rights while I stood silently, my body heavy with exhaustion. Emily peeked out from the hallway, Ethan clinging to her shoulder, his thumb in his mouth. When the police led Daniel out, he looked back at me, his eyes wide with something between betrayal and desperation. "Mom," he whispered, "don't let them take me. Please." I turned my face away. The squad car door slammed shut. After the house was quiet again, Emily came to me, her face pale. "Margaret, are you all right?" I sank into the armchair, my back clattering to the floor. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't know if I'll ever be all right again." She sat beside me, holding my hand. Ethan crawled into my lap, resting his tiny head against my chest. His warmth grounded me, reminded me that even in the wreckage of family, there was still something worth protecting. We stayed like that for a long time, the silence broken only by Ethan's soft breaths. The next morning, the phone rang. I nearly ignored it, but something told me to pick up. "Mrs. Walker?" The voice was firm, official. "This is Officer Reynolds from the county jail. Your son Daniel has been arrested for trespassing and outstanding debts. He's asking to see you." Would you like to visit him? My stomach twisted into knots. Part of me wanted to hang up, to wash my hands of him forever. But another part, the mother still clinging to hope, hesitated. I'll think about it, I whispered. When I hung up, Emily was watching me from the doorway. What are you going to do? She asked. I shook my head, my heart heavy. I don't know. But I do know this. If I go, it won't be as his savior. Not this time. That evening, I sat in the quiet house, staring at the photograph of George on the mantel again. His kind eyes seemed to watch me, as though urging me to stay strong. I don't know how much more of this I can take, I whispered. But I won't let him destroy what's left. I thought about Ethan asleep upstairs, about Emily trying to rebuild her life, about the wreckage Daniel had left in all our hearts. And for the first time, I realized something chilling. Daniel wasn't just broken. He was dangerous. And if I wasn't careful, his destruction would swallow all of us. 2 nights later, as I locked the doors and prepared for bed, I heard it again. The sound of footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate, moving around the house. When I peeked through the curtains, my blood ran cold. Because there, standing in the shadows of the yard, was Daniel. He was out of jail, and he was watching me. The night was too still. Even the crickets had gone silent, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I stood frozen at the window, my hand gripping the curtain, my eyes fixed on the figure in the yard. Daniel. His face was pale in the moonlight, his eyes dark and unreadable. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just stood there, staring at the house like a predator watching prey. For a long moment, neither of us moved. My pulse hammered in my ears, my body trembling with fear and anger. How had he gotten out so quickly? What deal had he made? What lie had he spun? Then, slowly, he raised a hand, not in greeting, not in peace, but in something closer to a warning. His lips curled into a faint smile, and then he turned and walked away into the shadows. I let the curtain fall, my knees weak. He was out. He was back. And whatever he wanted this time, I knew it wouldn't be small. The next morning, I told Emily what I'd seen. Her face went pale, her arms tightening protectively around Ethan. Margaret, what if he tries to take him? The thought made my stomach twist. He won't. Not as long as I'm alive. But inside, I wasn't so sure. Daniel had proven he would cross every line, break every boundary. And now, with Ethan in the picture, I had more to lose than ever. Maybe we should move, Emily whispered. Find another town, start over. I shook my head firmly. No, this is my home. I won't be chased out by my own son. But even as I said the words, doubt gnawed at me. Was I being strong, or was I being foolish? That afternoon, I met with Mr. Hayes again. His face darkened as I told him about Daniel's midnight visit. We'll file another restraining order, he said quickly, jotting notes. But Margaret, if he's ignoring the law, paper won't stop him. I nodded, my throat dry. Then what will? He hesitated, then leaned closer. You may need to consider security. Cameras, alarms, maybe even private protection. I know it sounds extreme, but Daniel isn't just reckless, he's desperate. Desperate men are dangerous. The word dangerous echoed in my mind all the way home. That evening, I installed new locks and ordered cameras online. It wasn't much, but it was something. Still, no lock or camera could protect my heart from the truth. My son was no longer the boy I raised. He was a stranger wearing my child's face. For a few days, things were quiet. Too quiet. Emily and I took Ethan to the park, baked cookies, tried to carve out moments of normalcy. At night, though, I barely slept. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the trees outside sent my heart racing. One evening, after putting Ethan to bed, Emily and I sat at the kitchen table sipping tea. Do you ever wonder, she asked softly, if Daniel was always like this? Or if something just broke him? Her question lingered in the air. I thought about the boy I once knew. The boy who made me Mother's Day cards with crooked hearts drawn in crayon, who kissed my cheek before school, who used to say he wanted to grow up to be like his father. I don't know, I admitted. But I do know this. Love isn't supposed to feel like fear. And that's all he gives me now. Emily nodded, tears welling in her eyes. We sat in silence after that, the tea cooling between us, the weight of broken family pressing down on both our shoulders. Then came the phone call. It was late, close to midnight, when the phone rang, jolting me from my half-sleep. My heart sank when I saw the caller ID. Blocked number. I answered cautiously. Hello. At first, nothing but silence. Then, a familiar voice, low and rough, slithered through the line. Mom. My breath caught. Daniel, you think you can cut me off? Take everything from me. His voice cracked with rage. You think you can buy my building, kick me out, humiliate me in front of everyone. Daniel, you did this to yourself, I said, forcing calm into my voice though my hand shook. You need help. He laughed bitterly. Help? No. I need what's mine, and I'm coming to get it. The line went dead. I sat there in the dark, the dial tone humming in my ear, my body cold with dread. The next day, I doubled down on protection. Cameras arrived, and Emily helped me set them up around the house. I ordered stronger locks, reinforced the windows. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel was watching, waiting for the perfect moment. And I was right. It was a Saturday evening when the storm finally came. The sky was dark, clouds heavy with rain, wind howling through the trees. Ethan was coloring at the table, Emily folding laundry beside him. I was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup, trying to cling to some sense of normal life. Then the power went out. The house plunged into darkness, the hum of the fridge silenced, the lights gone. Ethan whimpered, Emily gasped, and my heart dropped into my stomach. Because just then, the cameras outside flickered and went black. Someone had cut the power, and I knew exactly who. I grabbed the flashlight from the counter, my voice low, but steady. Emily, take Ethan. Go to the back room. Lock the door. She nodded quickly, scooping up her son as he clutched his crayons to his chest. Their footsteps echoed down the hall, the door clicking shut. I stood alone in the dark kitchen, the flashlight trembling in my hand, listening to the storm outside. Then came the sound, the creak of the back gate swinging open, footsteps on the wet grass, and Daniel's voice, muffled but clear, drifting through the storm. Mom, let me in. We need to talk. But his tone wasn't pleading this time. It was threatening. The storm rattled the windows as Daniel's voice echoed through the night. Mom, open the door. Lightning flashed, illuminating the kitchen for a split second. In that brief light, I saw the outline of his shadow through the curtain, looming larger than life, like some terrible phantom that refused to let go of me. I tightened my grip on the flashlight. My heart hammered so loudly I thought it might give me away. I forced my voice to stay calm, even though every instinct screamed at me to run. Daniel, go home. Another crack of thunder. Then his laugh, low, bitter, full of venom. This is my home, he shouted back. You stole it from me. You think you can take everything I built, everything I earned? You think you can just erase me? His fist pounded on the back door, the wood trembling with each blow. I flinched, praying the locks would hold. Down the hall, Emily and Ethan were silent. I knew she had locked the door to the spare room, but I also knew that if Daniel got in, there was nowhere safe to hide. I needed to keep him focused on me. Daniel, listen to me. I called out, my voice trembling but steady enough to carry. Breaking into my house won't solve anything. You're only making this worse for yourself. Silence followed, heavy and terrifying. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, he had walked away. Then the sound of shattering glass ripped through the storm. I spun toward the living room just in time to see him climbing through the broken window, rain soaking his clothes, his eyes wild with fury. Mom, he growled, glass crunching under his shoes as he stepped inside. We're going to settle this tonight. I backed away slowly, raising the flashlight like a weapon. Daniel, don't do this. But he kept advancing, his shoulders hunched, his fists clenched. He looked less like my son and more like a stranger, a storm of rage and desperation wrapped in human form. You don't understand, he spat. They laugh at me now. They whisper when I walk by. My own mother humiliated me. Do you have any idea what that feels like? I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Daniel, I never wanted to hurt you. But selling my jewelry, stealing from me, you cross lines I can't ignore. His face twisted. rain dripping from his hair. That was mine. Everything you owned should have been mine. Dad's money, your house, even that stupid collection of junk. I cut him off, my voice sharp. It wasn't junk. It was my life, my memories. You didn't just steal objects, you stole pieces of me. For a split second, I saw hesitation in his eyes. But then, as quickly as it came, it vanished, swallowed by the storm raging inside him. He lunged forward. I stumbled back, the flashlight slipping from my hand and clattering to the floor. Darkness swallowed us again, broken only by flashes of lightning through the broken window. I grabbed the first thing within reach, a heavy cast iron skillet from the stove. My hands trembled as I held it out in front of me, my body pressed against the counter. "Don't make me do this, Daniel," I whispered. But he didn't stop. His hand shot out, grabbing my wrist, his grip iron tight. Pain shot up my arm, and I cried out. He yanked me close, his face inches from mine, his breath hot and bitter. "You ruined me," he hissed. "And now I'm going to take everything back." Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from down the hall. Daniel froze, his head snapping toward the sound. My heart sank, Emily. Before I could stop him, he shoved me aside, sending me sprawling to the floor. My shoulders slammed against the cabinets, pain jolting through me. "No," I gasped, scrambling to my feet. "Leave them alone." But he was already storming toward the hallway, his heavy footsteps pounding against the floor. I forced myself up, my body screaming in protest, and chased after him. The door to the spare room rattled as Daniel pounded on it with both fists. Emily's terrified voice rang out from inside. "Stay away from us," she screamed, Ethan crying loudly in the background. Daniel laughed cruelly. "Open up, Emily. You think you can hide from me? You think you can keep my son from me?" "He's not your son," she shouted back. "You don't deserve him." For a moment, Daniel went still. Then, with a roar, he kicked the door. The frame splintered, the lock straining against the impact. I grabbed his arm from behind, pulling with all my strength. "Stop, Daniel. Stop this madness." He spun around, his eyes blazing. For the first time, I saw it, the emptiness. My son was gone, swallowed whole by greed and desperation. And then, as lightning flashed outside, I saw something glint in his hand. A knife. The sight froze me in place. My breath caught, my blood ran cold. "Daniel," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Please, don't." But his grip tightened around the handle, his chest heaving. "I told you, Mom. You left me no choice." Behind the door, Emily screamed again, Ethan sobbing louder now. The storm raged, the house trembling with thunder, and I stood there face to face with my own son, my blood, holding a knife as if I were his enemy. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if I would live to see the morning. The knife gleamed each time lightning flashed through the broken window. Rain blew in, the wind howling like a warning, but the storm outside was nothing compared to the storm raging inside my son's eyes. "Daniel," I said softly, raising my hands to show I wasn't a threat. My voice shook, but I forced calm into it. "You don't want to do this. You're angry, you're hurting, but this isn't the answer." He smirked, bitter and cold. "Don't tell me what I want. You never listened before. Why should you listen now?" My heart pounded in my chest, every beat a drum of dread. Behind the cracked door, Emily's voice trembled as she whispered to Ethan, trying to soothe his sobs. Each cry from that little boy lit a fire in me. I couldn't let Daniel near them. "You're my son," I whispered. "I love you, but I won't let you hurt them." At the word love, his face twisted. He lifted the knife higher, the blade catching another flash of lightning. "Don't lie to me. If you loved me, you wouldn't have betrayed me. You wouldn't have humiliated me in front of everyone. You wouldn't have taken my building." "It wasn't your building," I said, my voice breaking. "You lost at the moment you chose gambling over your family." His eyes narrowed, his whole body trembling with rage. Then, with a roar, he lunged. Time slowed. I stumbled back, grabbing the hallway table with one hand and shoving it toward him with the other. The table toppled, crashing into his legs. He stumbled, but didn't fall, the knife slashing through the air inches from my chest. I darted backward, my bare feet sliding on the wooden floor. He came at me again, his teeth gritted, his face pale with fury. "Daniel, stop!" I screamed, my voice raw. "This isn't you." But he didn't stop. He swung again, the blade cutting through the sleeve of my blouse, grazing my skin. Pain burned across my arm, hot and sharp. I cried out, but kept moving, forcing myself toward the living room. If I could get him away from Emily and Ethan, maybe, just maybe, I could keep them safe. We circled the living room like predators, the storm roaring louder through the broken window. My chest heaved, my body trembling. "You ruined my life," he shouted, pointing the knife at me. "Now I'm going to ruin yours." I stared at him, my heart breaking into pieces. This was my child. The boy I once cradled in my arms, the boy I read bedtime stories to, the boy who used to cry when he scraped his knee. And now he stood before me, knife in hand, ready to destroy me. "You still have a choice," I whispered. "Put the knife down, Daniel. Please, for once in your life, choose differently." For a heartbeat, I thought I saw something flicker in his eyes. Hesitation, doubt, the faintest crack in his armor. But then his jaw tightened, and with a snarl, he raised the knife again. A sound shattered the moment. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder, closer, cutting through the storm. Red and blue lights flickered faintly through the rain. Daniel froze, his eyes darting to the window. His breathing quickened, his hand shaking around the knife handle. "No," he muttered. "Not again. I'm not going back." He turned toward the hallway, toward the room where Emily and Ethan were still hiding. My stomach dropped. "No," I screamed, lunging forward. I grabbed his wrist, the knife pressing dangerously close to my face as we struggled. He shoved me hard, and I crashed to the floor, pain shooting up my hip. Daniel bolted down the hallway, slamming his shoulder into the spare room door. The wood cracked, the lock barely holding. Emily screamed, Ethan wailed, and my soul split in two. "Daniel," I cried, dragging myself to my feet, blood dripping from the cut on my arm. "Don't you dare touch them." But he didn't listen. He raised the knife, ready to force his way through. The front door burst open. "Police," voices thundered, heavy boots pounding into the house. Daniel spun, his eyes wide with shock and terror. The knife wavered in his hand as flashlights cut through the dark. "Drop the weapon," one officer shouted, his gun drawn, red and blue lights painting the walls. For a moment, time stopped. Daniel stood frozen, his chest heaving, sweat and rain dripping down his face. The knife trembled in his grip. And then he did something that made my blood run cold. He grabbed the door handle of the spare room, yanked it open, and dragged Ethan out by the arm. Emily screamed, clawing at his back, but Daniel shoved her hard against the wall. She crumpled, gasping for breath. "Stay back," Daniel roared, holding the knife near Ethan's small throat. "Or I swear I'll do it." The room spun around me, my vision blurred with tears. My son, my broken, desperate son, was holding his own child hostage in front of me. And for the first time in my life, I realized I might have to choose between saving my grandson and losing my son forever. "Don't move," Daniel shouted, his voice ragged, breaking with desperation. His arm was tight around Ethan's small body, the knife glinting dangerously close to his throat. The storm raged outside, rain hammering against the broken window, the red and blue police lights flashing across the walls in dizzying rhythm. The living room was chaos, Emily pressed against the wall, sobbing and gasping for air, two officers with guns drawn, and me frozen in the center, my heart torn in two. "Drop the knife," one officer barked. "Let the boy go." I said, "Stay back." Daniel roared, his face twisted, his voice cracking. "You don't get it. None of you do. Everything was supposed to be mine. She stole it all." He shook Ethan, who whimpered, his tiny hands clutching at Daniel's sleeve. My grandson's terrified eyes met mine, and in that instant, I knew I couldn't let this end with his blood on the floor. "Daniel," I whispered, stepping forward just slightly. "Look at me. Not them, not the police, me. Your mother." His wild eyes flicked to mine, the knife still trembling near Ethan's throat. "Mom, don't," one officer hissed, trying to pull me back. But I shook him off. If anyone could reach him, it had to be me. Daniel, I said softly, tears streaming down my face. Do you remember when you were Ethan's age? You used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms because you were scared. I'd hold you until you fell asleep. You were never alone. His jaw clenched, his breathing uneven. You still don't have to be, I said, my voice trembling. But this isn't the way. You're not a killer. You're not this monster the world says you are. You're my son. Please let him go. For a heartbeat, I saw it hesitation. His grip on Ethan loosened slightly, the knife dipping lower. His eyes softened just for a second, as if the boy I once knew was clawing his way back to the surface. Then the storm cracked with thunder, and Daniel flinched, his face hardening again. No, it's too late. She took everything from me, and now I'm taking something back. Daniel, don't, he snapped, pressing the knife so close to Ethan's skin that my knees nearly buckled. If I can't have my life back, then nobody's happy. Nobody wins. The officers edged closer, their voices calm but firm. Daniel, put the weapon down. Don't do this. It doesn't have to end here. Shut up, he roared, his voice echoing off the walls. You think prison scares me? You think death scares me? The only thing that scares me is being nothing. And thanks to her, that's all I am. He jerked his head toward me, his eyes burning. You made me nothing. The words cut through me like a blade. I wanted to scream, to tell him he was wrong, that I had loved him every day of his life, but I couldn't find my voice. My body shook, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then Ethan, with all the innocence of a child, whispered, Daddy, please don't hurt me. The knife wavered. Daniel's face twisted, his lips trembling. His breath came in harsh gasps, his entire body shaking as if his mind was waging war with itself. For a moment, the room was silent except for the storm outside. The officers didn't move. Emily's sobs quieted. My whole world balanced on the edge of that knife. Daniel, I whispered again, if you love him, if you love me, prove it. Put it down. End this before it's too late. His eyes locked on mine, and for the first time, I saw tears gathering. And then, a sudden crash shattered everything. The front door, still half open, slammed against the wall as another figure stormed in. It was Mr. Hayes, my lawyer, soaked from the rain, his face pale as he took in the scene. Margaret, he cried. What? Daniel spun, startled, and in that split second of distraction, Ethan twisted in his grip. The boy wriggled free, darting toward Emily, who scooped him up with trembling arms. Ethan, I cried, relief flooding through me. But that relief lasted only a second, because Daniel's face twisted in pure rage as he realized he had lost his leverage. With a guttural roar, he lunged, not at the police, not at Emily, but straight at me, the knife raised high. Daniel's scream split the air as he charged, the knife glinting in the lightning. My legs moved before my mind could catch up. I stumbled backward, my hand flying to the edge of the overturned hallway table. Mom! Emily's scream pierced my ears, but I couldn't look at her. My son, my only son, was seconds away from driving that blade into me. The world slowed. I saw the storm raging through the shattered window, rain whipping the curtains. I heard Ethan's terrified cries muffled against Emily's shoulder. I felt the pounding of my own heart, so violent I thought it might break my ribs. And then impact. Daniel slammed into me, the knife plunging downward. Instinct took over. I grabbed his wrist with both hands, straining with every ounce of strength left in my 65-year-old body. The blade stopped inches from my chest, the muscles in his arm like steel, his face contorted with rage. Let go, he roared, spittle flying, his breath hot against my face. I can't, I gasped, tears streaking my cheeks. I won't let you destroy yourself. He pressed harder. The knife inched closer, the cold metal brushing against my blouse. My arms shook violently, the tendons burning as I fought him. Behind us, the officers shouted, Drop the weapon. Drop it now. But Daniel didn't hear them. His whole world was locked onto me and mine onto him. In that moment, memories flooded me. Daniel at 5, bringing me dandelions from the yard, smiling with a gap in his teeth. Daniel at 10, crying after striking out at his baseball game. me kissing his forehead and telling him failure wasn't the end. Daniel at 16, storming out of the house when his father died, shouting that life wasn't fair. And now Daniel at 38, a grown man, eyes wild with fury, holding a knife against his mother's heart. How had we gotten here? Daniel, I whispered, my strength failing. You don't have to be this man. Please don't do this. For a second, his grip faltered. His eyes flickered with something, pain, regret, fear. My own tears fell faster, dripping onto our locked hands. Then his face hardened again. It's too late. He shoved with all his weight. A gunshot exploded. The sound ripped through the house, louder than the thunder, sharper than the storm. Daniel froze. His eyes went wide, his body stiffening. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then his arm went slack, the knife slipping from his hand and clattering to the floor. I stared at him, horror filling me. Blood bloomed across his shoulder, spreading dark and wet through his shirt. No, I cried, catching him as his knees buckled. His weight collapsed against me, heavy, almost crushing. The officers rushed forward, guns still raised, shouting commands I couldn't hear over the ringing in my ears. Emily sobbed, clutching Ethan tighter. Mr. Hayes stood frozen in the doorway, his face pale as paper. I cradled Daniel's head in my lap, my hands shaking, tears blinding me. Daniel, stay with me. Please stay with me. His breathing was ragged, shallow. His eyes fluttered open, cloudy with pain. He looked at me, not with anger now, not with hatred, but with something else. Something softer. Mom, he whispered, his voice faint. I didn't mean. Sure, I whispered, stroking his hair like I had when he was a boy. Save your strength. Help is coming. But inside, dread coiled in my stomach. Paramedics stormed in minutes later, pushing me aside gently as they worked. The knife lay forgotten on the floor, smeared with rain and blood. Officers ushered Emily and Ethan into the kitchen, shielding them from the chaos. I sat on the couch, my body numb, watching strangers fight to keep my son alive. The boy I had carried for 9 months, raised for decades, loved despite every betrayal, was now bleeding out in my living room. And I didn't know whether to pray for him to survive or to finally be free of the pain he brought into our lives. When they lifted him onto the stretcher, Daniel's eyes found mine one last time. His lips parted, but no words came out. Then they carried him into the storm, red and blue lights flashing, sirens wailing as they sped into the night. I sat there in silence, trembling, Emily clutching my hand tightly, Ethan curled up between us. It was over. Or at least I thought it was. Because later that night, after the paramedics left and the police took our statements, I found something shoved beneath the couch cushion where Daniel had fallen. A folded envelope. My name written on the front in his handwriting. I froze, my fingers trembling as I held it. Whatever was inside, I knew it was his message, the truth he hadn't spoken, the words he wanted to leave behind. And as I slowly opened it, my breath caught. Because what I read inside changed everything. The envelope trembled in my hands, its edges softened from wear. The ink on the front, Mom, was smudged, as though written in haste or with unsteady hands. My throat tightened. Emily leaned closer, her face pale, her arm wrapped protectively around Ethan. What is it? I swallowed hard. It's from Daniel. The words tasted like ash. Slowly, I broke the seal and unfolded the crumpled paper inside. My eyes darted over the shaky handwriting, each word pulling me deeper into a darkness I wasn't ready for. Mom, if you're reading this, it means things didn't go the way I planned. I know you hate me now. Maybe I deserve it. But I need you to know something. I wasn't alone in this. The debts, the threats, they weren't just mine. There are people after me, dangerous people. They said if I couldn't pay, they'd come after you. After Emily. After Ethan. My breath caught. The room swayed. I sold the jewelry because I thought it would buy me time. I lost the building because I thought gambling would fix everything. Every mistake I made wasn't just for me. It was to keep them off our backs. But it wasn't enough. It's never enough. They're coming, Mom. And they won't stop. Not until they get what they're owed. I'm sorry. Daniel. The paper slipped from my hands, fluttering to the floor like a dead leaf. Emily's voice was sharp, panicked. What does it say? I couldn't speak. My mouth was dry, my chest heavy. Instead, I bent down, picked up the letter, and handed it to her. Her eyes scanned the words, widening with every line. When she reached the end, she clapped a hand over her mouth, stifling a sob. Oh my God, she whispered. Margaret, what does this mean? Who's coming? I stared at the rain streaking the broken window, the storm finally easing into a soft drizzle. But the silence it left behind felt louder, heavier. It means, I said slowly, my voice low, that Daniel wasn't just destroying himself. He dragged us into something far bigger. And it's not over. For the rest of the night, none of us slept. The police had taped off the living room, collected the knife, taken photographs. They'd left us with empty assurances, you're safe now. He's in custody at the hospital. He can't hurt you. But I knew better. Because Daniel's letter wasn't a threat. It was a warning. The next morning, I called Mr. Hayes. He came over quickly, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. When I showed him the letter, his face hardened. This complicates things, he murmured, adjusting his glasses. If Daniel's deaths are tied to dangerous people, you could all be at risk. Emily clutched Ethan tighter. What kind of people? He hesitated. The kind who don't go through courts. The kind who don't call lawyers. A chill ran down my spine. What do we do? I asked. Mr. Hayes sighed. We'll notify the police. But if what Daniel says is true, you may need more than law on your side. You'll need protection. The word hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Protection. Against faceless men who now had reason to believe we owed them. That evening, as Emily tried to keep Ethan occupied with cartoons, I sat at the kitchen table with the letter in front of me, tracing Daniel's words with my finger. I thought of my husband, how he had worked his whole life to build something for our family, how he would be devastated to see his son like this. I thought of Daniel as a boy, his smile bright, his dreams bigger than his little body could hold. How had we fallen so far? But grief had no time to linger, not now. Because if Daniel was right, our enemies were already watching. And we had no idea when they would strike. The first sign came 2 days later. Emily had taken Ethan to preschool, and I was sitting in the living room, patching the torn sleeve Daniel's knife had cut. The house was quiet, too quiet, when I noticed something odd. The curtains fluttered, not from wind, but from movement. I froze, my breath caught. Slowly, I turned my head. Through the window, parked across the street, was a black sedan. Its engine idled, exhaust puffing faintly into the cold morning air. 2 men sat inside. Dark suits, sunglasses, still as statues, watching. My blood ran cold. I pulled the curtain shut, my hands shaking, and hurried to the phone. Emily, I whispered when she answered. Stay at the school. Don't come home yet. Why? What's wrong? Just do as I say. My voice cracked. There's a car outside. 2 men. They're watching the house. Her sharp intake of breath told me everything I needed to know. She believed me. Mom, she whispered, her voice trembling, what are we going to do? I looked at the letter still sitting on the table. Daniel's words burned into my mind. They're coming, Mom. And they won't stop. I closed my eyes, my chest tight with dread. We prepare, I said, because whatever's coming, we have to survive it. That night, after Emily and Ethan finally returned under police escort, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet, but I could feel it, the weight of eyes on us, the shadow of danger pressing close. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the pipes made my skin crawl. Sleep wouldn't come, only fear. And then, just past midnight, it happened. A sound from outside. Not the hum of a car this time, not the rustle of trees, but the sharp, deliberate crunch of footsteps on gravel. Someone was in the yard. The sound of footsteps froze me in place. Slow, deliberate crunches across the gravel driveway, each one louder than the last in the dead of night. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would wake the house. My first thought was Emily and Ethan. They were asleep down the hall. My second thought was Daniel's letter. They're coming, Mom. I slid off the bed, careful not to make a sound, and grabbed the old wooden bat I kept by the dresser. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Holding my breath, I crept to the window. The curtain swayed as a breeze slipped through the broken pane we hadn't yet replaced. I peeked through the narrow gap. A man stood near the edge of the porch. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black. His face was hidden by the brim of a cap, but I could see the faint glow of a cigarette tip as he inhaled. Another figure moved in the shadows behind him. There were two of them, just like in the car. My stomach dropped. The front door rattled. The sound shot through me like an electric shock. I gripped the bat tighter, my palms slick with sweat. "Emily," I whispered, rushing into the hallway. "Wake up. Now." She stirred, bleary-eyed, clutching Ethan close. "Mom? What?" "No time. They're here." Her face drained of color. She scooped Ethan into her arms, his sleepy protest muffled against her shoulder. "What do we do?" she whispered, panic lacing her voice. I forced my voice steady, even though my knees felt like water. "We get to the back." Quietly. But before we could move, the front door gave a violent crack. Though it splintered, the old hinges groaning under the assault. Emily gasped. Ethan whimpered. "Go," I urged, ushering them toward the kitchen. "Out the back. Now." We slipped through the darkened hallway, my grip tight on the bat, Emily clutching Ethan so hard he whimpered again. Behind us, the door finally gave way with a deafening crash. Heavy boots pounded against the floor. "Check upstairs," a deep voice barked. I shoved Emily through the kitchen. "Hurry." We burst out into the backyard, the night air sharp and cold. The storm from earlier had left the ground slick, mud sucking at our shoes. "This way," I whispered, leading them toward the shed at the far end of the yard. But then a figure stepped out from the shadows, blocking our path. He was massive, taller than Daniel, with a thick neck and arms like tree trunks. His face was partly obscured by the hood of his jacket, but his grin gleamed in the moonlight. "Going somewhere, ladies?" Emily gasped, clutching Ethan tighter. I raised the bat, my arms trembling but firm. "Stay back," I warned, my voice shaking. The man chuckled, low and cruel. "Or what? You'll hit me with your stick? Cute." He took a step forward. I swung. The bat cracked against his forearm, and he cursed, stumbling back. For a second, victory surged through me. But then his hand shot out, grabbing the bat mid-swing. He wrenched it from my grip with terrifying strength and tossed it aside, like it was nothing. "Wrong move, Grandma," he growled. Emily screamed. Ethan burst into terrified sobs. The man lunged, his massive hand reaching for me. And then, headlights. A car screeched into the driveway, tires spitting gravel. The beam of its headlights cut across the yard, catching the man square in the face. He cursed, throwing up an arm to shield his eyes. The car door slammed. "Get away from them," a familiar voice roared. I turned, my heart leaping into my throat. It was Mr. Hayes. He strode across the yard, a pistol gleaming in his hand. His usually calm, lawyerly face was carved into something fierce, something I had never seen before. "Move," he barked, pointing the gun squarely at the man. For a second, the yard held its breath. The man's grin faded, replaced by something colder. "Calculating." "Fine," he muttered, backing away slowly into the shadows. "This isn't over." And then he was gone. I collapsed to my knees, my breath ragged, tears spilling freely now. Emily crouched beside me, clutching Ethan, both of them trembling. Mr. Hayes hurried forward, helping me up. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head, though my whole body ached with fear. How did you know?" "I came to check on you," he said quickly, eyes still scanning the yard. I had a bad feeling. Good thing I did. Emily's voice shook. There were more inside. Mr. Hayes's jaw tightened. "Then we need to leave. Now." We piled into his car, Ethan still sobbing softly. Mr. Hayes drove fast, his eyes flicking constantly to the mirrors, his hand never straying far from the pistol on the seat beside him. As the lights of town came into view, I clutched Daniel's letter in my lap, my mind racing. It was true, every word. These men weren't bluffing. They wanted something, money, revenge, blood, and they wouldn't stop until they had it. But what haunted me most wasn't the men in the yard, or even the gun in Mr. Hayes's steady hand. It was the thought that somewhere, lying in that hospital bed, Daniel knew exactly who these people were. And I realized, with a fresh chill running down my spine, if they couldn't get to him, they would come for us again. And next time, we might not be so lucky. We didn't stop driving until the town lights disappeared in the rearview mirror. Mr. Hayes kept his hand steady on the wheel, but his jaw was locked tight, his eyes flicking constantly between the dark road ahead and the mirrors. Beside me, Emily sat curled up with Ethan, her hand stroking his hair as he finally drifted into a fitful sleep. I held Daniel's letter in my lap, the paper already soft from being folded and unfolded too many times. The words blurred as I read them again and again. "They're coming, Mom. They won't stop." He hadn't been lying. Mr. Hayes broke the silence. "I know somewhere we can go. A cabin in the mountains. Belongs to an old friend of mine. Remote. Off the grid. We'll be safe there, at least for a while." Emily's voice was barely a whisper. "For a while." Mr. Hayes glanced at her, his face grave. "These men aren't the kind who give up easily. They'll look. But it'll buy us time. Time. That was all we seemed to be chasing now." By dawn, the car wound its way up narrow mountain roads, the air thinning, the trees crowding close. The cabin was small, weathered, tucked away among the pines. From the outside, it looked abandoned, but inside it was warm enough, with a fireplace, worn furniture, and a creaky loft where Ethan could sleep. "This will do," Mr. Hayes said, checking the locks on the doors and windows. Emily set Ethan down on the couch, pulling a blanket over him as he stirred. I stood in the middle of the room, the stillness pressing in on me. For the first time in days, the silence wasn't filled with sirens or pounding boots, only the wind through the trees. But peace felt fragile, like glass. One wrong move and it would shatter. The first night passed without incident. We cooked canned soup, played cards by lantern light, and tried to pretend this was just a strange camping trip. Ethan laughed once, his small voice bright in the gloom, and for a fleeting second I remembered what joy felt like. But when he was asleep, Emily's mask cracked. She sat by the fire, staring into the flames, tears glistening in her eyes. "Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling, "what if they never stop? What if Daniel ruined everything?" I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "Daniel made choices. Terrible choices. But that doesn't mean we're doomed. We're still here. We're still together." Her eyes met mine, filled with a mixture of fear and hope. "Do you really believe that?" I wanted to say yes, to reassure her like I had when she was a child afraid of thunderstorms. But the truth caught in my throat. Instead, I kissed her hand. "I believe we fight. As long as we're breathing, we fight." By the third day, the cabin no longer felt safe. Tracks appeared in the snow outside, too large to be animal, too fresh to ignore. Mr. Hayes examined them grimly. "They found us." Emily's face went pale. "Already? They're good at what they do," he said. "But we're not sitting ducks. Not if we're careful." He started keeping watch at night, the pistol always within reach. I offered to take a shift, but he refused. "You need your strength," he said firmly. "They'll use fear to wear you down. Don't let them." That night, I dreamed of Daniel. He was little again, maybe 8, his cheeks flushed from running in the yard. He ran to me, laughing, clutching a dandelion in his fist. "Here, Mama," he said, holding it out. But when I reached for it, the flower turned to ash, crumbling in my hand. Daniel's smile faded, his eyes darkening. "They're coming," he whispered, his voice twisted and broken. "And it's your fault." I woke with a start, sweat soaking my nightgown. The fire had burned low, shadows dancing across the cabin walls. Then I heard it. A floorboard creaked. Not from the loft. Not from Emily. From outside. I slid out of bed, my heart hammering. Mr. Hayes's chair by the window was empty. The pistol was gone. I crept to the door, peering through the narrow crack. In the yard, under the pale moonlight, Mr. Hayes stood facing 2 dark figures. His breath puffed white in the cold air, the gun steady in his hand. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the tension in his stance, the sharp movements of the men's shoulders. One of them pointed toward the cabin. Toward us. Mr. Hayes shook his head, his grip tightening. And then chaos. A flash of movement. A struggle. The crack of a gunshot splitting the night. I gasped, clapping a hand over my mouth. Emily rushed to my side, her eyes wide with terror. "What happened?" she whispered. I couldn't answer, because outside, Mr. Hayes staggered, his shirt blooming with dark red. He collapsed to his knees in the snow, and the two men started toward the cabin. The gunshot still echoed in my ears when Mr. Hayes crumpled into the snow. My heart screamed louder than my voice as I pressed my hand against the door to keep from falling. Emily's sharp whisper broke through the ringing in my head. "Mom, what do we do?" I turned to her, my daughter's eyes wide. Ethan clutched against her chest, his small face buried in her sweater, tears already soaking through. "They're coming," I said hoarsely, grabbing Emily's arm. "We have to hide. Now." The crunch of boots grew louder. Heavy. Sure. Each step closer to the cabin felt like a nail in a coffin. Emily and I rushed toward the loft ladder. I pushed her up first, lifting Ethan into her arms before climbing behind them. My joints screamed in protest, but fear lent me strength I didn't know I still had. We crouched low in the shadows of the loft, holding our breath as the cabin door creaked open. The men entered. I could see them through the slats of the loft floor. Two of them, both broad-shouldered, one with a scar that cut across his cheek like a jagged crack in stone. They moved with confidence, their boots leaving muddy prints across the wooden planks. Scarface barked orders in a low voice. "Check upstairs." My chest clenched. If they climbed the ladder, we'd be trapped. The other man circled the room, rifling through cupboards, kicking over chairs. "She's not here." "She is," Scarface said. His voice was calm, too calm. The old man wouldn't have risked his life otherwise. I bit down on my lip so hard I tasted blood. Emily's hand gripped mine, trembling, her other hand pressing over Ethan's mouth to stifle his whimpers. Every second felt like a lifetime. Then Scarface moved closer to the ladder. His hand brushed against the rung. My whole body tensed. My mind screamed, "Do something, anything." And in that moment, I remembered the old hunting rifle mounted above the fireplace. My late husband's rifle. I'd walked past it 1,000 times since arriving, but never thought it might save us. Quietly, carefully, I whispered into Emily's ear, "Stay here, no matter what." Her eyes widened, panic flaring. "Mom, no." But I slipped away before she could stop me. The men's attention shifted as I crawled along the loft, my knees bruising against the wood. My fingers found the rifle, cold metal beneath a layer of dust. I lifted it down as silently as possible, praying it still worked. Scarface's head jerked upward. What was that? Before fear could paralyze me, I pulled back the lever, the sharp clack echoing through the cabin. Both men froze. "Step away from the ladder," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. They looked up, eyes narrowing as they spotted me in the loft, the rifle braced against my shoulder. Scarface smiled, slow and cruel. "You won't shoot." "Try me," I hissed. The second man laughed, low and mocking. "Lady, you don't even know if that thing's loaded." I pulled the trigger. The blast shook the cabin, deafening in the small space. The shot missed his chest by inches, splintering the wood beam behind him, but the message was clear. The laughter died instantly. Scarface's expression darkened. "You'll regret that." He lunged for the ladder. I fired again. This time the shot hit. His arm jerked back, blood spraying across the wall as he cursed. Emily screamed, Ethan wailed, and my hand shook violently, but I forced the rifle steady again. "Get out," I shouted. "Now." The wounded man staggered, clutching his arm. His partner dragged him toward the door, shouting curses that curdled my blood. "This isn't over, old woman." Scarface snarled, his voice raw with fury. "You've just signed your death warrant." They stumbled out into the night, leaving muddy tracks and blood on the floorboards. The cabin door slammed behind them. For a long moment, silence reigned. Only the crackle of the dying fire and Ethan's sobs broke it. Then Emily collapsed against me, shaking, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, oh my God, you saved us." I hugged her tightly, the rifle still clutched in my trembling hands. My heart hammered so hard it hurt. I wanted to believe we were safe, that the nightmare was over. But deep down, I knew better. Morning came, gray and cold. Mr. Hayes's body still lay in the snow, a crimson stain spreading beneath him. We couldn't even give him a proper burial, not with danger still lurking. Emily cried as we wrapped him in a tarp and carried him behind the cabin. He saved us, she whispered, brushing his cold cheek with trembling fingers. And we couldn't save him. I touched his shoulder gently, my throat too tight for words. Hayes had been more than just a lawyer. He had been a friend, a shield, a steady hand when our world was crumbling. Losing him left us vulnerable in ways I couldn't bear to admit. But grief had no time to settle, because as the sun rose, I spotted it, tire tracks leading away from the cabin deep in the snow. The men hadn't fled. They had regrouped, and they would return. That night, as we tried to rest in the silence of the cabin, I lay awake with the rifle across my lap. Every creak of the wood, every gust of wind outside, set my nerves on fire. Emily dozed fitfully beside Ethan, her hand never leaving his. I stared into the darkness, my thoughts spinning. If those men came back, I might not be able to stop them. Not again. And Daniel, lying in a hospital bed somewhere, the cause of all this? My jaw tightened. A bitter truth settled in my chest. If I wanted to save my family, I needed to do more than hide. I needed to end this. But just as I resolved to find answers, the silence broke. A faint sound at first, then louder. Engines. Multiple. Headlights cut through the trees outside, spilling across the cabin walls. I rushed to the window. 3 cars pulled up in the snow, doors opening in unison. Men stepped out. Not 2 this time. Not 3. At least 7. All armed. All walking toward the cabin. The engines rumbled like a storm rolling through the mountains. I pressed myself against the cold window pane, my breath fogging the glass as I counted the men climbing out of the cars. 1, 2, 3, 7. 7 shadows moving with purpose, their boots crunching in the snow, rifles glinting under the moonlight. My stomach twisted. 2 men had been terrifying enough. But 7? Behind me, Emily stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She saw my face, then followed my gaze to the headlights cutting across the cabin. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, God," she whispered. "Mom, there's too many." Ethan whimpered in his sleep, curling tighter under the blanket. "Sho," I said, pressing a finger to my lips. My voice was steady, though my hands shook around the rifle. "We don't panic. Not now." Emily's eyes brimmed with tears. "What do we do?" I swallowed hard. "We survive." The men fanned out, their dark figures melting into the trees, surrounding the cabin like wolves circling prey. One of them barked an order, his voice low and sharp. "Inside. Bring them out alive if you can. Kill the old woman if you have to." My blood ran cold. Emily clutched Ethan tighter, her breath ragged. "Up to the loft," I whispered. "Go now. Don't make a sound." She hesitated, her eyes darting to the door. The pounding of boots against the porch echoed through the cabin walls. "Mom, what about you?" "I'll buy you time," I said firmly, forcing the words through my fear. "Go." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she obeyed, clutching Ethan as she scrambled up the ladder into the shadows. The door shuddered under the first heavy blow. I braced the rifle against my shoulder, planting my feet on the worn rug. My heart pounded so loud, I thought it would drown out the sound of the men outside. "Come on," I whispered to myself. "If you want us, you'll have to get through me." The second blow cracked the frame. The third sent the door flying off its hinges, slamming against the wall with a deafening crash. They poured in, 3 men first, guns raised, eyes scanning the room. I fired. The rifle's blast shook the cabin, smoke filling the air. One man staggered back, clutching his chest as he fell. Another dove for cover behind the couch. The third roared, charging forward. I swung the rifle like a club, slamming the butt into his jaw. He crashed against the table, splintering it to pieces. But more footsteps thundered behind them. More shadows filled the doorway. Too many. I ducked behind the fireplace, reloading with shaking hands. The old rifle jammed, the mechanism stiff with age. My breath caught, panic clawing at my throat. A shot whizzed past my ear, splintering the wood. I dropped flat, the ringing in my ears drowning out the shouts. Find them. Scarface's voice roared. He was here, his arm bound in a sling, fury burning in his eyes. The old woman's mine. Boots thundered across the floorboards, men tearing through cupboards, flipping furniture, kicking open the bathroom door. One of them started up the loft ladder. Emily's scream pierced the chaos. No, I cried, scrambling to my feet. I fired blindly, the shot grazing the man's leg. He fell back with a curse, clutching his thigh. Emily clutched Ethan tighter, tears streaming down her face. Scarface laughed, cruel and sharp. There you are. He leveled his pistol at me. The world slowed. I thought of everything. My husband's smile, Daniel's dandelions, Emily's laughter as a little girl, Ethan's tiny hand gripping mine. And then Mr. Hayes. His body in the snow, his sacrifice. Rage burned through the fear. I pulled the trigger. The rifle roared, but Scarface ducked, the bullet slamming into the wall behind him. He fired back, the shot tearing past my shoulder, burning my skin. I cried out, stumbling, the rifle slipping from my grasp. Scarface advanced, his grin wide and vicious. Game over, Grandma. But before he could fire again, the cabin shook with a thunderous crash. One of the back windows shattered, glass spraying across the room. A dark figure leapt inside, moving fast, silent as a shadow. Another shot rang out, this one not from Scarface. The man beside him dropped, clutching his chest. Scarface spun around, his eyes narrowing. What the? The figure stepped into the light. My heart stopped. It was Daniel. He looked thinner, weaker than I remembered, his hospital gown replaced with jeans and a torn jacket. His shoulder was bandaged, blood seeping through. But his eyes burned with something fierce. Get away from my family, he growled, leveling a pistol at Scarface. The room froze. Emily gasped from the loft. I clutched my bleeding shoulder, my heart torn between terror and a flood of emotions I couldn't name. Scarface sneered. Well, well, the prodigal son. Daniel's finger tightened on the trigger, and in that suspended second, the air heavy with smoke and blood, I realized. My son had just walked back into the fire he had started. The moment Daniel stepped out of the shadows, the entire cabin seemed to stop breathing. Smoke curled from the broken window, the stench of gunpowder thick in the air. Scarface's gun wavered for a fraction of a second before steadying again, his lips curling into a cruel grin. Well, well, he said slowly. The ghost decides to haunt us after all. Daniel's hand shook on the pistol, but his voice stayed steady. Let them go. This is between me and you. Scarface chuckled, low and dangerous. No, no, boy. This is between me and all of you. You cost me money, men and blood. Now I'll collect what's mine. His eyes flicked up toward the loft where Emily clutched Ethan to her chest. Starting with the brat, Emily cried out, pulling Ethan back, her face pale with terror. Something inside me snapped. You won't touch them, I shouted, forcing myself upright despite the pain searing through my shoulder. My voice cracked, but the fire in it surprised even me. You've taken enough from this family. You will not take one more thing. Scarface smirked, raising his gun. You going to stop me, Grandma? But before he could fire, Daniel lunged forward, slamming into him. The gun went off, the shot deafening inside the cabin. Chaos erupted. The two men crashed against the table, splinters flying. Daniel's fist connected with Scarface's jaw, but Scarface was stronger, fueled by rage. He shoved Daniel back, landing a brutal punch to his ribs. Daniel stumbled, coughing blood. No, I screamed, snatching up the fallen rifle. My hands trembled, slick with sweat and blood, but I aimed it anyway. Two of Scarface's men surged toward me. I fired, the recoil slamming into my shoulder. One fell, screaming. The other ducked, firing wildly. Emily screamed from above. Mom! The bullet tore through the loft ladder, splintering wood. Ethan wailed, clinging to her neck. Daniel roared, tackling Scarface again, his pistol skidding across the floor. They grappled, teeth bared, snarling like animals. Scarface reached for the knife strapped to his belt, raising it high. Time slowed. Daniel! I cried. The blade arced down, and I fired. The shot echoed like thunder. Scarface froze, his eyes wide in shock. For a moment, he looked almost human. Then he crumpled to the ground, blood spreading across his chest. Silence. For one fragile second, I thought it was over. Then the last two men opened fire. Bullets tore into the walls, shattering glass, knocking over lamps. The cabin filled with smoke and screaming. I dove for cover, dragging Daniel with me. He coughed, his face pale but alive. "Mom," he rasped, gripping my arm. "Finish this. Don't let them." A grenade rolled across the floor. My blood ran cold. "Emily, get down," I screamed. The explosion ripped through the cabin. The world became fire and sound. Heat slammed into me, throwing me against the wall. My ears rang, vision blurring, lungs choking on smoke. Through the haze, I heard Ethan's cries. Emily's voice, hoarse and desperate. "Mom, Mom." I crawled through the wreckage, my body screaming in pain. Flames licked the beams, the roof groaning above us. The two remaining men advanced through the smoke, silhouettes of death. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I grabbed the pistol Daniel had dropped, forcing myself to stand. My hands bled, my shoulder burned, but rage steadied me. "For my husband," I whispered, aiming at the first man. I fired. He fell. "For Mr. Hayes." Another shot. Another body dropped. I turned to Scarface's corpse, smoke swirling around him. My voice broke into a snarl. "And for my family." I pulled the trigger one last time, the bullet slamming into his lifeless body. Silence fell, broken only by crackling flames and Ethan's sobs. Emily scrambled down what was left of the ladder, clutching him tight. She ran to me, tears streaming down her soot-streaked face. "Mom, you're bleeding. Oh God, you're bleeding." I smiled weakly, brushing her cheek. It's nothing." Daniel staggered toward us, coughing, his face smeared with blood and ash. He collapsed at my feet, clutching my hand. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking. I never meant for it to come to this." Tears blurred my vision. "We'll talk later. Just stay with me." He squeezed my hand, his grip weak but desperate. "I thought I'd lost you. I thought I'd lost them." I pulled him close, holding both my children, one broken, one terrified, and my grandchild between us. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have called the police after the blast. Help was coming, but standing in the wreckage of the cabin, the flames devouring the past, I realized something. We weren't just survivors. We were fighters. Scarface and his men had come to break us. Instead, they had forged us into something stronger. Family. And family was unbreakable. Weeks later, when the smoke had cleared and the dead were buried, I stood in front of the apartment building I had bought. My building. Daniel was in rehab, Emily had moved into one of the new apartments, and Ethan was playing in the courtyard with the other children. I watched him laugh, his voice carrying across the warm afternoon air, and for the first time in months, I let myself breathe. A tenant walked past, nodding respectfully. "Afternoon, Mrs. Turner." I smiled. Afternoon. Because that was who I was again. Not just a grandmother, not just a widow, not just a survivor. I was Margaret Turner, the woman who had lost everything, fought back, and reclaimed her family's future. And as I looked up at the building, sunlight glinting off the windows, I whispered to myself, "Surprise, darling. This time the house is mine.